I'm real happy to get to introduce our first session this morning. As you can see by the agendas on your table, our focus is on education, and what better way to start by hearing from the leaders of the Charleston County School District where it all starts. We are honored to have the Charleston County School Superintendent Dr. Gerrita Postlewait with us today, along with two school board members, Dr. Mack and Kate Darby, and a special guest who we know from home, Dr. Gene Wilhoit, who's the current CEO for the Center for Innovation in Education at the University of Kentucky and a former commissioner for the State of Kentucky Department of Education. We're really eager to hear their thoughts today on the Charleston system, as well as the changing delivery system of education and how the business community needs to be involved, and we know that. After the panel remarks, Manny Caulk, the superintendent of Fayette County Schools, will facilitate a question and answer session. Will our guest speakers please come to the stage?
Now, you go ahead, I think, in order.
Hey, how you doing? How are you? It's good to see you. Let me begin.
It's all yours.
Good morning. It's wonderful to be with you. I'm sort of the insider-outsider here today, and good to see many dear colleagues and friends with whom I've worked in the past and hope to in the future. I've been asked to sort of set a context for the morning conversation, and before we hear about the effort here in Charleston. All of you know this. These are very different times for our country and for our communities. The effects of globalization, the movement of technology as a major driver in society, the increasing diversity of our population in this country and in the world have literally changed the context for which we are living. Some folks realize that, but a lot of us don't. And that seems for me to be the central issue in this country. We can no longer afford to educate a few of our kids to very high levels and to have throwaway children in this society. It's a moral imperative, but it's also an economic imperative for the future. We are on the verge of making some critical decisions about what we're going to do in public education in this country that will literally affect, what happens to this country in the next several years. Well, since I left the commissioner's position in Kentucky, I spent a little time in DC, and then I'm back at UK now, and we're talking about some of these issues. And asking educators to be very reflective about what's going on and what they need to do. And I think for many of them, this is going to be a struggle, because all of us who become comfortable in the way we've always done things and asked to change have some difficulty with that. But we have no choice. Education has to make some dramatic changes, and we're calling it transformational kinds of changes in the way we've educated our children. You see, you have said to us as educators that we want our children to leave school prepared for success in life, in citizenship, in a career. And in order to do that, we've gone through some soul searching at a national level, and I was deeply involved in this, but we went to the business community and asked them what would be important for a graduate in America today. And we asked those folks who were receiving those students in colleges of education and community and technical colleges the same question. We didn't ask them, what would it take to be an outstanding student in higher education, or what would be the best employee you ever had? We said to the higher ed community, what would it take for a graduate in a public school to enter college in a credit-bearing course, not a remediation course, and get a C or better? We asked the business community, what would it take for an employee to enter a career in business and have some opportunity for a middle-class income in the future? Those were the standards, and you told us. And what's happened in the United States is we have had to reset our expectations. And that has made a major difference in how we're thinking about public education. So what would it take? And that definition, the words that came from your mouths and the words from others, told us that we didn't have the kinds of expectations for our graduates that you need for success. So what are we talking about today? I don't think, in order to reach these new goals that everyone says are important and are realistic and are aligned with your expectations, if we maintain those goals, we cannot continue to practice in the way we have practiced historically. There is a direct conflict between the system we have inherited and the goals we've set for the future. And we have to either lower our expectations and suffer the fate, or we've got to redesign the system. And this restructuring involves, one, making sure that the business community supports us with these high goals. We cannot back off of these higher expectations. Yes, it's going to be difficult for some students to meet them. It's going to be difficult for many educators to get them to those systems. But you must hold on to this idea that students must be prepared for the next level of education and life. If we don't, the whole system will begin to erode itself. Secondly, I don't think you can hold on to any longer the idea that we can move kids through the system the way we've done historically. The way we need to credential learning in the future is through demonstrated mastery of learning. And that doesn't align with all kids at age 5 beginning school at the same time. That doesn't align with the whole idea that everyone moves ahead, everyone takes the same courses, everyone does it at the same pace. Which gets us to this other point. We can no longer move cohorts of kids through a system, whether they get it or don't get it, whether they get an A or a D, and we cannot continue to move them through that system without this kind of adjustment, which means personalizing learning to a much greater degree than we do today. When you begin to play this out, this is new roles for teachers, these are new roles for the students, it empowers folks, it means new delivery systems and support structures around those students. When you begin to talk this way about education, this is kind of scary to some folks. But my sense is we can ignore this conversation and continue to talk about what we need to do in the public education, or we can take on seriously these issues that we're talking about right now. It means intestinal fortitude from the business community to stand up and say, we're going to make these changes, whatever price we have to pay in the next few years, or we're going to suffer in the long term. That's what we've been about in public education. Those are the kinds of shifts that are underway. And what we're involved in right now is this sort of phase of unfreezing a system and beginning to try to reshape it in a way that makes more sense to these new goals that we've set. So what does it mean for the business community? And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Postlewait. One, as I've said, hold on to these high ideals about learning. Secondly, for me, it means more than just knowledge and content. It means the kinds of skills that you're going to require. This message has to come from you. It is not so much that we have to put in the heads of those kids more knowledge, because they can get it right now in this little device immediately, and they're much more adept at it than we are. And it means they have to have the skills to use information in productive ways in the future. And the skill development that you're requiring, how do I work well with other folks? How do I stick to a task over time? How do I develop self-initiative? These are important concepts that you have to be saying to educators are important to deliver. Secondly, in my mind, this whole delivery system about how we educate children needs a large infusion of the business and education community coming together in ways we've not in the past. It's one thing to ask you all for support, financial support for schools, but if I were in your shoes, I would say, what else are you asking of me? And that means your engagement in helping set an agenda in public education, getting at the table with educators and defining what's important, what are the skills that you need in employees, and defining what that curriculum is going to be. It means engaging very directly in the delivery of that system. It means beginning to be a true partner in this process as we move forward. Third, it means breaking down these institutional barriers that we've had established. Why do we set kids in a K-12 system and then they graduate and they go to a community technical college system or a higher ed system and then they go into business? How do we begin to merge those delivery systems? There's no reason why a student who's prepared to enter into a college and career technical path couldn't do that during a high school. There's no reason why we're doing remediation at community and technical colleges at 50 and 60% of our students when we know they're incurring debt and not being successful in school. Why are we not having K-12 and higher education merging their delivery systems in a way that these students, it makes sense to the students and the parents? It's an economic imperative for the future. It's a moral imperative for what we're going to do. So that's the conversation we would love to have you all not only engage in, but begin to lead. Your voices are powerful. People listen to you. They know the importance of all of this in society. Intuitively, parents know this, and the community knows it. We need your voices very loudly and clearly in this agenda. So that's one thing for me to stand up here and talk about this. It's another thing for folks to engage very directly in beginning this kind of struggle that's necessary. This is about all students reaching very high levels of education. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Postlewait.
Thank you, Gene. I have a cold. I don't always sound like this, just saying. So we're going to try to do our best to hang on here to this voice for 10 or 15 minutes. Public education is in the same place that the Welsh congregation was when the Welsh congregation made 3 decisions. The first decision they made was that they want to build a new church. The second decision they made is that they want to use the foundational stones from their current church to build the new church. The third decision they made is that they're going to stay in the old church while they build the new church. Our foundational stones in education are this age grade, lockstep system that we move children through, and the Carnegie unit system of credentialing learning. We're going to start by just looking at some of the evidence that the current system is not working well for a number of children. The first slide shows you where our 3-year-old children who come to school, our 3- and 4-year-old children, are performing. We see that there are great gaps in the tests of vocabulary development and then the tests of mathematical reasoning. First of all, we would want 100% of our children to be on track at the right readiness levels to enter school ready to learn. Instead, we see that they're at very low levels of development. We don't offer universal 3- and 4-year-old programs, but for those children whom we bring in, we see this terrible gap, not only between children and where they should be if they were coming from well-to-do or middle-income households, but between black and white children. That's a gap we need to acknowledge, and as some of the advisors who work with us tell us, we need to stop admiring this problem and do something about it. We see that by the end of 3rd grade, we haven't done a very good job of closing that inequity gap. In fact, the gap has gotten a little worse. The gap between the performance of African American children and white children has gotten worse. You can see it there, both in reading and in mathematics. We go on to look at the end of course results. This is the test that South Carolina administers in high schools in Algebra 1, in English, in biology, and U.S. history. At the end of the course, students have to take an end of course test. So it looks as though our teachers and students have done a great job of making progress in closing that gap in mathematics. But last year, for the first time ever, South Carolina tested all of their children on the ACT. I know this is something Kentucky has done for quite a while, but last year was our state's first effort to test all of our children on the ACT. So imagine our board members' shock when they were accustomed to getting these kinds of data and then they saw these kinds of data on the ACT. As you look at this chart, you see that fewer than 5% of our African American children are ready to go to college and succeed in mathematics. Only about half of our white children are ready to go to college. So we have this huge disconnect between what our state was expecting and measuring and what ACT says is the right kind of readiness, not only to enter college, but to be prepared to go on into living wage jobs. Then we took a look at the children who were leaving from Charleston County School District and matriculating immediately into Trident Technical College. We met with Dr. Thornley, who's here this morning and whom you'll hear from. As well as, thank you. That's a little Twilight Zone kind of. This job is disturbing enough without those kinds of. sort of extraterrestrial signals. So when we looked at the children who were going from our school system into Trident Technical College, alarmingly we realized that 90% of our graduating seniors going on to Trident Technical College had to take developmental coursework. That is alarming. Then we began to look at how our system is dealing with children who are not thriving well in the environments we provide. These statistics are really off-putting. So if we look at our out-of-school suspension rates, you see that black students are 6 times more likely to be suspended out of school than white students. Our black suspension rate is 17.7% of our African American children, compared to 3% of our white children. Although 42% of our students are African American, 81%, they amount to 81% of the students we're suspending. Now I'll just go on to that last block. There are 180 instructional days in the year. When you look at the number of days that we suspended students, our students lost 91 instructional school years from out-of-school suspension. So we clearly have a huge disconnect between what our system is doing to support learning and the extent to which our children who most need public schools to get it right are thriving in that system. So what we identified was this opportunity gap. We use the local chamber statistics and find that of the 26,000 jobs that are being created in our area over the next few years, very few of our children coming out of Charleston County schools are positioned to be able to eventually take advantage of living wage jobs, entry jobs where they could expect to keep learning and advance. So we believe that public education plays a key role, a critical role, an instrumental role in closing that opportunity gap. That, in fact, defines the value add for a public education system. It isn't about scoring well on accountability measures that might be established by the federal or state government. It's about understanding what are the meaningful indicators to families, to students, and to the community that Charleston County Schools is adding value by preparing children to take advantage of opportunities they could never have grasped if they hadn't had a wonderful experience with our public school system. When we look at the severe job shortage by field, these data were provided by the Chamber. We see the kinds of jobs that are available in our area. These jobs take a 4-year degree. Then we looked at many of the job opportunities that could be entered through a 2-year degree or connecting more closely with Trident Technical College. And you'll notice that last line, the legal secretary, the clerk, and the reporter, are jobs that can be entered at various levels of proficiency. And then finally, we kind of get to the jobs that require certificates. These are living wage jobs in our area that we're not intentionally preparing children to take advantage of. We live in a certificate society. It's a society that increasingly wants young people to demonstrate proficiency, as Gene mentioned. And yet, we're living in a system that has this old bell curve of achievement batch processing system. We give a few kids A's and B's, and they move on through the system at a level where they can expect to continue to learn and grow at increasingly higher levels of difficulty and complexity. But many of our children who come through with C's and D's are not at all prepared to continue to learn. So what we have to do is start, rather than just giving all students the same amount of time to learn and grading them A through D or F, we've got to be able to identify where every single one of our students is in terms of their skill levels. So what this chart shows is the work that's begun in a small handful of our schools. Every single one of those dots, every line, represents a student. And what we're doing is every 9 weeks tracking the progress of those students. We have some schools in what we would call intensive care, where we've put our best practitioners. We're planning to expand that program next year. These data actually come from a school that's run with a private public partnership with a local businessman who has Sherman Financial Group, who wants to try to figure out what it takes to move children from poverty to high levels of literacy. So this is a school we run in tandem with a local businessman who's helping us identify precisely what children need to learn at every step of the pathways along this progression to proficiency. The initiatives we have underway in our district, I've only been here since last July, and I arrived after a tumultuous year for the district and a very disruptive search for the superintendent. So I was not warmly embraced by a lot of people in Charleston County. It has not been easy to begin to build a coalition of the willing to support what we know we need to do for all children. But these are the initiatives that we have underway, largely due to the fact that our business community through the local chamber, our local technical college, the College of Charleston, and the Citadel are so focused. They have a laser-like focus on what we need to do for the children who depend on public schools to get it right. So we're intensively looking at what our mathematics curriculum is. We believe that some of the mathematics courses that we have to deliver through our state Carnegie units don't contain the right stuff. So Boeing has agreed to head up a study committee with 3 or 4 other businesses involved to make sure that the mathematics we're teaching contains the right kinds of knowledge and skills and competencies and complex thinking that kids actually need to demonstrate in order to move productively from secondary to post-secondary endeavors. We have a feeder pattern alignment. That is to say, not all of our schools were really organized in a way that were intended to bring kids through a straight K through 12 feeder pattern with a learning progression. So we understood exactly where the kids were. And we expected at the end of grade 3, kids to reach certain proficiency levels before they entered upper elementary. Or at upper elementary, certain levels of proficiency before they get into middle school. So that we're really all along the way thinking about what it is we have to deliver, getting really specific about that. We're moving a lot more into engaging students. Kim Wilson, one of our principals, will talk a little bit more about that whole personalized learning effort a little more in a few moments. We have a 2+2+2 pilot. The understanding is the school district in the first 2 years of high school aims to have as many sophomores as possible ready to pass the entrance exam at Trident Technical College in their junior and senior years, begin taking credits that will be valid in terms of their certificate pursuit or their long-term 4-year major pursuit. So we've lined up We do the first 2 years. That means back in our system, we have to do a much better job getting kids ready when they enter high school. By the end of the sophomore year, we're going to administer the technical college entrance exam to all of our students. Our goal is to consistently increase the percentage of students who can pass that exam. Junior and senior levels will deliver dual credit either through Trident Tech or College of Charleston, and then we're working out an agreement with the College of Charleston where those students will move into the last 2 years. We've had tremendous support from the business community for giving our kids scholarships to get this program started. There's an early college and Scholars Academy plan in place to target specifically those students who have the capability but who may not come from families that know how to negotiate this higher education morass. And then finally, others will talk more about it, the apprenticeship program this morning, but it is growing exponentially. And I'm so blessed to have arrived at a place where these kinds of supports for kids and the collaborations are underway. I'm going to turn the podium over now to our board members who will talk a lot about their perspectives from serving in the district before I arrived and their experiences in interfacing with the public. Mrs. Darby? Okay. Reverend Mack?
Thank you very much, and thanks to Gerrita for her awesome presentation. I'm just going to talk a little bit, and then Eric is going to step in and cover anything I have forgotten. I just want to welcome you all to Charleston. You have a phenomenal group here, and I can say that from experience. I worked for the Chamber of Commerce here in Charleston for 14 years and helped to organize trips like this. We never had this many people, so congratulations to you all for really getting involved in what you need to do to improve your community. I just want to talk a little bit about the board, what's working, what's not working. I will say that I think that our community and your community probably have hired and now have in place the best 2 superintendents in the country, so congratulations. And I will also say that Gerrita was understating when she said when she arrived here, it was not welcoming. It was worse than that. And it was an interesting year for us. We had a lot of tragedy, as I'm sure you all know, with the shooting at the Mother Emanuel Church. And an amazing thing happened then. It was a tragedy. 9 people were killed. But our community really came together in a way that I hadn't seen it come together before. Many other areas of the country were, people were out in the streets and yelling and screaming and fighting and protesting, and our community came together to support the families that lost loved ones and to figure out how we can work together better and move our community forward. Now, we've made some progress, but there's still a lot of progress to be made. So I think that Gerrita has done an amazing job in this past year of really building bridges, the relationships with the colleges, with Trident Tech, with different community groups. It's been amazing to see what she has been able to do in a year. We do have a challenging community in that the organization of the school district in 1968, we had multiple school districts throughout the community in Charleston, and it was all consolidated into one. And for those legislators to get agreement to do that in 1968, we had a county board, and then we had to have 8 constituent boards. Eric's actually served on one of those boards and can talk to you about that if you have any questions, but it makes it challenging for us. I think we're the only school district in the country that has that kind of organization. So you have 9 elected county board members and then these 8 constituent boards that all have different numbers of and they're elected, and some of them want to do a lot, Some of them want to do nothing. Some of them want to do things that are in our purview. So it's challenging, and that's something we are constantly working on trying to improve. We also, I think, in Charleston County have had a dysfunctional board, and that many board members did not understand their role as a governance board. And for probably 25, 30 plus years, the Charleston County School Board has been fodder for the newspaper. And the school board members made it easy for them to do that. It was just lots of controversy and not working together. But I think now, the board that we have now, there are 9 of us, 7 of us are really working together well. We don't agree all the time, but we understand the role, our role on the board. We understand our role with the superintendent. We've had to make some tough decisions this year. The staff recommended closing 2 schools. The board agreed to close 1 and to look at some other options for the other. And the community had been talking about closing this 1 school for years, but the board, whatever board at the time, could not reach consensus. It was a school that has 90 high school students there. We could not be successful and serve those students with 90 kids. So I really see our board working together, understanding what their role is. Monday, we have a consultant coming in, and we're going to work on what are some of the benchmarks we want to have for our board, for the district, and try and move towards truly, really the board handling the governance side of things and not micromanaging and staying on the front page of the newspaper. So the other challenge we've had, and I'm going to let Eric talk, is, and this has been a challenge for all of us, including Dr. Postlewait, is once she was here in place, we discovered we had about a $26 million budget shortfall. It was not pretty. I guess it was actually 18 million, or I was adding. Was this 26? Okay. So 26 million. I was hoping I was wrong. And the district, the thing that I will say, I think that Dr. Postlewait's strongest point is that she lays it all on the table, the good, bad, and the ugly. We've never had really staff or leadership here that says, this is a gap, this is the real achievement gap, this is the budget, this is the real problem we have with the budget. And we've had lots of surprises this year, not positive ones. But staff and with the board working together, we've been able to make some progress with those. But it's been a challenging year. But I don't want to take up all the time. So Eric Mack, who is just an awesome board member, knows a lot about our rural communities, and really been an integral part of our team this year. So.
I will turn this off. Good morning. Well, I'm going to give a different spiel and a different spin, simply because I am really excited about where we are moving within Charleston County. Now, our superintendent, Dr. Postlewait, will not give herself any credit, but let me just say this, that I am so excited that we have a phenomenal superintendent here in Charleston County that has really rolled up the sleeve, dug into what the issues are within our schools, and have literally from day one begin to put before us every day about the statistics and the challenges that we're facing within our schools and within our students. Now, before I say anything else, please, because I am excited about my superintendent, let's give her a round of applause. And it is challenging simply because you've seen the alarming numbers of closing the achievement gap between Afro-Americans and our white students. Now, let me just say this, that we've talked about for many years about closing the achievement gap. But Dr. Postlewait have actually come in and not only said that we need to close the achievement gap, but she has literally put before us almost every meeting the opportunities and the challenges that we have facing us, reminding the board members that not only must we talk about closing the gap, but we must put our hands and our minds together to make sure that this happens. And that is the great thing I liked about Dr. Postlewait, is because simply she understands where we are within Charleston County. She came from Horry County, understood the dynamics there, came here to Charleston County, and understand that some of those dynamics are happening right here as well. So what you have seen in the presentation today as we're moving forward, give us another year or two and see that truly the word about excellence in Charleston County will definitely radar across the airwaves, simply because we are putting together initiatives that's going to help our students to move forward. Now, as we begin to look at our rural districts, a lot of our rural schools are predominantly black schools with very low enrollment. What happens with that is that we run into the era of schools beginning to be coming to the point of on the brink of closing, simply because why? Parents are seeking the best opportunities for their children. So what they're doing, they're sending kids to other neighboring school district that offers more for their child. Now, who would blame them for doing that? But within this process, and sometimes it becomes to be very touching, because why? Communities with schools as within it, they're very close-knit, and nobody wants to see their schools close. But we're in the business to do what? Educate children and give them the best opportunity available. So sometimes, and you've seen where we ran into an issue with a school closure that just happened. A school that had only 96 students that was combined with a middle and a high school closed. It was a tough decision, but it was a decision that was made by our phenomenal superintendent to say, we must do better for all students. And what happened? That school closed. The kids moved to a neighboring school that has all of the bells and the whistles, and I wish you would get an opportunity to visit Wando High School before you leave. It is a mini campus that offers all of the bells and the whistles that an education opportunity is afforded. Now, there are other schools that offer, but with Wando, and I want to talk about it for a minute, you can leave from Wando High School with a cosmetology degree with an opportunity to take the state board test without having to go 2 years of school. You can leave Wando High School as a senior with a CNA certificate without having to go where? To 2 more years or a year or two for that degree and certificate. You can leave Wando High School with a mechanic certification as a graduate. So these are some of the building stones that we're looking at and moving forward to offer it across the district in some manner. Our superintendent has took on some tough challenges when it comes to closing the achievement gap, putting some initiatives in place. And we have all of these special interest groups that has all of the great and bright ideas. But none of it mounts up to moving kids forward. Our superintendent, Dr. Postlewait, stands ready. And that's what I love about her, taking on the challenges to know that we must close this gap in reading, mathematics, in order to get our kids ready. Because I know that Dr. Darnley, as she sits here, understands the importance of making sure that our Charleston County School District students are ready when they come to Trident Technical College, and not having to take 1, 2, or 3 remedial courses to get them to where they need to be. They need to be there by the time they get to Trident Technical College, as using that as an example. So we have faced many, many challenges here in Charleston County, but I stand proudly to say to you that we are moving forward in a positive manner, putting in places initiatives that's going to advance our students that will be career ready when they leave high school, to be able to advance into our neighboring jobs within our business, within the community. And I believe strongly that as the community embrace the idea that our superintendent is moving forward for our students in Charleston County, and our leaders and our business partners getting on board, that we will see success as we move forward in educating every child in Charleston County. I thank you so kindly for your time.
Good job.
Thank you, Dr. Mack, and to our panelists. Gene, good to see you again. We too in Fayette County are excited about our superintendent. Dr. Manny Caulk, if you will come forward and help us through this question and answer period, we'd be most appreciative.
Good morning, everyone. Let's again recognize Reverend Mack, Kate, Gene, and Gerrita. This work is about a willingness to be vulnerable and to be able to share your data in an honest way with your community. And so everyone recognizes what the issues are so they can be on board with a plan to move the district forward. I often say, before I open up for Q&A, is that the future of a city, whether it's Lexington or Charleston, is inextricably linked to its public school system and the success of those students. And that's why we're gathered here this morning. And so I will open it up for questions that you may have at this time. Yes.
Here you go.
Good morning, Manny. Good morning.
Robert.
Robert Riggs. Dr. Postal, thank you for your comments. And you mentioned about 3- and 4-year-olds, and I'll challenge you that we really need to start education on the first day of birth. And unfortunately, currently in our society, when a child is born, that announcements are made, birth happened today, but we don't know who that person is till they're 5 years old when they enter school. We don't know what's happened to them first 5 years of life that sets their character and sets their intelligence. The majority of the lower income children probably don't have a book in the house. Nobody talks to them, nobody reads to them. And when they go through 5 years of life like that and start to enter school, they have heard 25 million fewer words than those who have had the opportunity to be in a house where books were revered and they were read to and talked to on a regular basis. And when you start school with a vocabulary gap that big, you are only an exceptional human being when you can make up that difference. Otherwise, you stay behind. And I have been challenging our community to think about how we engage parents of newborns in their role and responsibility of preparing the child to enter school at age 5. The other portion about what you were talking to and engaging the business community, and I've told a few of them that they're really good at selling their end product and marketing their business and marketing their end product, and they're not very well at marketing careers. And a career day in a school system is not marketing careers. It's an everyday issue where the schools invite business and manufacturers to come and train their students or tell the students what their opportunities are in their industry, and to help the kids understand what they need to know when they graduate from school to be able to do those careers that they may find fascinating. Thank you.
Yes. There you
Good morning, and thank you so much for coming. Dr. Postlewait, did I understand you to say that your schools that are in intensive care are now being staffed with the best practitioners?
Yes, sir. We will have, we have 86 sites, and next year there will be 4 sites. This year there are 2 sites that are part of the public-private partnership. In those sites that are part of the public-private partnership, there were 1,800 applicants for 50 positions. And so there is a special, different kind of recruiting process that occurs for those schools. So that's exactly what we're doing. That's what we feel we have to do, but we have to create some proof points showing the combination of 3 or 4 critical factors that in fact accelerate the learning of children, almost eliminating the children who are scoring in the bottom quartile, the bottom 2 quartiles on standardized tests. Yes, sir.
May I follow up, Manny?
Of course.
So what techniques are you using to get your best instructors where they are most needed?
Right. Well, Charleston County has a history of trying just about every imaginable approach to doing that. What seems to work for us is finding the leader whom teachers want to work for, and then making sure that leader is a really strong leader with a vision of what the school can be, with a belief in kids and their parents and the community, with a willingness to be really clear about what's required. And in those circumstances, teachers seem to flock for the opportunity to do good work. That's what they came into this profession to do. Also, those schools are relieved from some of the annoying bureaucratic stuff that we ask people to do. So that's what we're doing. At the end of 5 years, the teachers in the schools in the public-private partnership get a longevity bonus. At the end of 5 years, they get a bonus of $1,000 per year. The longevity bonus at the end of the service seems to be very effective. A bonus to come and serve did not seem to be an effective practice. But we do pay bonuses to principals who go to those schools to build this culture.
Just to add to that a moment, we have surveyed teachers on different occasions about the best teachers, about what would draw them into schools, and none of them have mentioned the fact that they don't want to work with children who are behind or who are difficult to work with. The reason they don't go to these schools is there are not peers like them. They are isolated individuals working alone. Secondly, the principal issue, someone who understands and protects them and motivates them, moves them forward. And finally, some opportunity to spend time together as a faculty and to work out the issues beyond being in a classroom with children. And this is a problem in America. We spend more time than any other country in face-to-face interaction with children and give our teachers less time working with each other. So teachers are smart. They identify these issues. They don't want to go into one of these schools that have all kinds of challenges without these kinds of supports.
Manny, we've got one
So
back
next
here.
question.
Thank you for spending some time with us. As a Fayette County resident and proud father of 2 daughters, African Americans who came up through our Fayette County Public School system, who both have their masters in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech, which is one of the toughest engineering schools in the country, I think it's very important to talk about the community involvement and how I know how important the parents play a key role in that process. Can you talk a little bit about how you plan to close that achievement gap and engage the community at the same time? Because I think that's so important to get the parents buy-in.
So I can say a word about that. In the schools where by the end of 2nd grade, children of color and poverty are performing as well as or better than children in any other school in the district. That's remarkable. In those schools, the first interview question that is posed to teachers is, what % of the parents do you believe want their children to do well in school? If the answer is anything less than 100%, that person is disqualified. The interview continues, but it's a short interview, right? The second question is, what % of the homes would you be willing to visit before school starts? 100%. The third question is, what percentage of the homes would you be willing to visit at least 3 times during the year? 100%. The fourth question is, how often will you expect parents or family members of the children in your classroom to come into school and volunteer? And the answer to that has to be at least an hour every 2 weeks. And so in these schools, at this time of the year, those teachers are out knocking on the doors of the parents in whatever neighborhood, and they're getting the parents involved. There are t-shirts for those parents. There are classes for the parents. This is what it takes for your child to be in this school. This is what we want. So it's a total changing of the culture. It is truly a partnership. And then beyond that, doing whatever it takes. It's not rocket science. It's hard, hard work on top of a deep belief system. We believe in good.
Can I add to that?
Of course.
I'd like to add to that. There's a book that has been written by Stephen Peters. He's an author in Orangeburg, South Carolina, that is entitled, "Do You Know Enough About Me to Teach Me?" And that book I have read several times, and if you get an opportunity to read that book, it's entitled, "Do You Know Enough About Me to Teach Me?" And it's from an Afro-American perspective of knowing enough about the individual or about the students that comes into your classroom. I strongly believe that every educator that teaches a child ought to understand the background or the dynamics of the children that they're teaching inside their classroom. That helps, in my opinion, to better understand the dynamics of how far they need to go into that child, because I believe that every child is at 100%. They may not perform at 100%, but they are at 100%. So I believe that it's the teacher's responsibility to try to pull out that other 25. If they're only operating at 75%, try to find a way how to pull out that other 25% to get that child at operating at 100%. It's very, very important that every teacher knows the background and the dynamics of the children that they are teaching so that they will be able to reach them to the fullest capacity. So if you get an opportunity, read the book, "Do You Know Enough About Me to Teach Me?" by Stephen Peters, and I think you will find some great interesting analogies that are used and concepts that are used within that book as far as the teacher and the student relationship combination.
Thank you.
We got one right here.
Again, thank you all for sharing your time today. And as I look at your story, our story is somewhat similar. And this whole thing about culture and climate is something that we have talked a lot about. And I hear what you're doing in some of your targeted schools around trying to build that culture. How have you all helped transform the entire district? Because we're thinking about a district-wide approach that not only involves our teachers and our students and our parents, but much like the business community. So what are some of the tools that you guys have used and strategies to drive more of that culture that you're desiring within the school system as you see it for the future?
Yeah, I'll talk very quickly about 3 things. First, it's our belief that we have to create some proof points because so many people believe this can't be done, right? So that's the first step, is creating proof points. And around those proof points, being very, very clear about what it took to get there. What kinds of resource does it take to create this place? The second is being very intentional about building in scaling mechanisms. So we want one of these schools at the McNair site, which is used as it's a school that's used as a swing space for schools to be in while their buildings are being rebuilt. So you might have a school there for 3 years while their old school is under construction, is to create McNair as the training ground. So very intentionally, this coming year, setting that school as our development site. So more and more and more we have a way to train leaders and we have a way to train teachers in that school. The third piece is working with the state to set up a different accountability system for us. So after this meeting, Gene and Linda Pittenger, who's here, and I will be scooting out to meet with the head of the State Education Oversight Committee in South Carolina that sets the accountability measures. Because the state accountability system will drive school districts back into their old batch processing system. That's what it measures and rewards. On a particular day, you're judged on how many 10-year-olds you have at this place. So we're we're trying to put different accountability measures in place. You heard Mrs. Darby say that on Monday, our board will spend all day with the national experts on setting their own local accountability results and holding the administration accountable for showing continuous progress on the things we know are important to our kids. The indicators that we'll all accept, that we're overcoming institutional racism that does exist. The indicators we'll all accept, that we're serving all of our children, not abandoning some in order to serve others. The indicators that we'll accept, that greater percentages of students every year are able to step productively out of Charleston County Public Schools into a positive, productive post-secondary endeavor. That means working very carefully with the military. Kids take the ASVAB test to get in the military. Well, 31 on that test gets you into the Army. What does that do for you in the Army? You're in the infantry. If you want to get into the training programs, you have to start scoring up at 50, 70's even better. So the third piece is being very intentional about those indicators that are really valuable and important to kids and their families. Those are not the indicators that are on the end-of-year accountability tests. So those are the three pieces. And we pray a lot. We don't know that we're on the right track. I mean, we're just being very honest. Nowhere in the United States has anybody ever brought large numbers of children from abject poverty to high levels of literacy. Our profession needs to tell the truth about that and then say, how can we learn together? And if it doesn't work, acknowledge that what we tried didn't work. So there's a whole brand of superintendents who are not about protecting their jobs, they're about doing this work. And we love our job.
You have a question in the back, and then we have a question in the front.
Just to follow up first, I have actually, with Reverend Akins, our Pastor Akins asked a question about your intensive care schools and selecting an instructional leader that people wanted to flock to. Is that decision a board decision, meaning the Board of Education or the superintendent's decision? Or is it made at the school level?
Mrs. Darby, one of our board members, want to talk about that?
Ultimately, the board approves the principal recommendation from Dr. Postlewait. And I firmly believe, and I think Reverend Mack does too, we hire the superintendent to move the district forward, and we hold her accountable for that, and then she hires and fires from there. So we do in our current system approve. I'd be fine not doing that, but in our current system we approve the principals. But I think she's right about the having the really strong leaders. You're going to hear from Kim Wilson. Clearly our schools that are the highest achieving have really strong principals, strong leaders.
The reason I pointed that out is that in Kentucky we have a site-based system, so it's completely taken out of the hands of a superintendent to make that decision. So that's a difference. Yeah. I just wanted to point that out. But what are you doing? You showed the disparity numbers with suspension rates and how that affects how many days of instruction the kids are missing. Have you all come up with a plan that we can share with us?
Just so Dr. Postlewait will save her voice a little bit, we discovered this year, Dr. Postlewait put a new person in charge of that whole area, and we discovered that particularly in the high schools, different principals were interpreting the student code of conduct differently, or so a lot of kids were getting suspended at one school for having whatever the issue is, and in another school they wouldn't be. So that really came to light this year. There are two teams working on rewriting the student code of conduct. We're going to have one for elementary schools and then one for middle and high schools. I think that's how we're doing it. So I think we'll see a huge change in that over the next couple of years. The person in that position is a strong leader and is really doing a number of things so that the kids, we're not to the point of doing restorative justice yet, but those kinds of things where students work out the issues together, they see what the consequences are. We don't want the kids, it doesn't do them any good unless they've brought a gun to school, to not be in the classroom. So we're working very hard on that. We have a great person heading that up.
And we do have one process, or it's called PBIS, Positive Behavioral Inter-Support System, and we see that in those particular schools, the suspension rate has dropped drastically due to that system being put in place. So there are some process in place to help to reduce the suspension rate so that we can keep kids inside the classroom and not at home somewhere.
And then I'll just say very quickly, the West Ed Research Laboratory has awarded our district a grant, and this summer and next summer, all of our middle schools will be going through a training called Capturing Kids' Hearts. Mr. Wilson may talk a little bit about that program, but it is hugely beneficial in changing the culture and the belief system and the attitudes of the adults in the school toward embracing kids.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
Yeah, my name's Lee Greer, and I'd like to expound on a point kind of Robert brought up first, and then Nick expounded on too, and that is by the way, thank you all very much, it's been very informative. The point you made on the gap at the pre-K level, that's astonishing. So, I mean, my observation is that, you even talked about institutional racism, that I think the problems maybe even begin before you even come into the educational system. So how much support are you getting from the city to attack the problems from years, like from the day of birth to the first day of school? And, specific solutions the city's taking to help you out? And do you feel like you're just trying to overcome the problem rather than fix the root cause of the problem, which actually happens before they even enter school? Because that is, the gap may be increasing, but it's such an astonishing gap at the very beginning that the problems really happen before they come to school. So if you just expound on that, because I think that's really where, like us, we want to fix the problem. We also want to overcome the problem. We want to fix the root cause of the problem. Thank you.
Well, you met Mayor Tecklenburg yesterday, who I understand delivered 30 minutes worth of 10-minute remarks. He's wonderful. He's absolutely, he's amazing. And so one of the opportunities we have is to get into the preschool programs everywhere and make sure that we're much more intentional, that we understand what vocabulary development looks like, and that those child care providers are doing more than babysitting. And that's true whether they're public or private, whether they're affiliated with the school district or not. So there's been a huge change in our relationship with Head Start and Early Start, which were previously not affiliated at all with the school district. And the mayor is instrumental, and the council. So we have not only the city of Charleston, but the city of North Charleston, the city of Mount Pleasant, some other municipalities who are poised to make a huge push in that preschool area.
But still, only 50% of kids enter an early childhood program. So we have 50% who don't.
That's right. That's right.
What are we doing on the parenting level from the day of birth?
You know what? I could describe to you what we're doing. I'll simply say it's not enough. It's not enough. We do what we can do within what we feel our mission is. But we do a lot of parenting. The parenting programs are really well organized. There's a big graduation ceremony. They pomp and circumstances played. Those parents get a certificate. It may be the first time they've ever walked across the stage in their lives. Their families come and celebrate that. It's huge. I don't know if it's making an impact, and I don't know if we can grow that quickly enough and broadly enough.
So I want to draw this section to a close. We know there's many more questions out there, but I'll leave you with one of my Caulkisms, is that a winning organization is a listening, learning, and teaching organization. As you can see, Charleston and Fayette County is in that learning and listening mode. So I want to, again, let's give a round of applause to Reverend Mack, Kate, Gene, and Gerrita.